Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of the What My Best Friend Does podcast. Today we are joined by one of my besties, Rosanna. She's a senior creative and she's had a super interesting journey. So I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the What My Best Friend Does podcast, episode 1. I'm so gassed. And today I'm joined by my best friend, the senior creative, Ro. Ro, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be number one bestie. Oh my God.
I'm happy to have you here. Let's jump straight into it. What is a senior creative?
I think when you say creative director, people know what that is roughly. And it's basically under that. And a creative is like, I think it's easier to think about it as a conceptual creative, which is an even more wanky name. But essentially, a creative is someone that comes up with ideas. Traditionally in advertising, you would have two creatives on a team. You would have a copy creative and an art creative.
Okay.
A lot more nowadays, you get hybrid creatives, which is what I am, so I do both. So it's people that come up with ideas for adverts, like content, films, and then make them happen.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and that's already helped to shed some light. How do you take a blank canvas, put an idea together, and then shoot that? Because to me, even when I'm like putting this podcast together, it seems so daunting. Do you break it down into stages? How long does that process typically take?
Yeah, I think a massive part of it is like how good your brief is at the beginning. So really it shouldn't be like a super blank canvas, because you should have a pretty tight brief from, say, a brand or an agency or like a consumer product thing or whatever it is, or even in-house, like for a business. You have a brief that says, this is what we need, this is who we want to reach, this is what we want them to feel, what would you do to solve that? Sometimes you get really rubbish briefs that are like, we want to reach everyone, we want to do everything, and that is like a blank canvas, and you have to try and like refine it a bit, because it's very tough when you're...
So do you push back?
Yeah, definitely. Like I would try and say like, you can't reach everyone, you can't please everyone, you can't, do you know what I mean? But there are always going to be those briefs that are very open, and part of that process then becomes like, as you come up with ideas or as you start to figure out what they actually want, because they'll be like, oh no, that's not it, and it's like, okay, well, this was in your brief. But so yeah, it's hard sometimes, but I think like part of that initial process when you're like pitching them, you would normally come up with a few ideas, and through that process you start to feel out like what they actually want from it.
When I think of creative, I think agency. So typically, do you work for an agency? Do you work directly with like the brand in-house, let's say for Pepsi Cola? And then I suppose my next question is, do you work on multiple projects at once?
So I work at the moment for a sports publishing platform. I have only ever really worked in sports content and marketing and broadcasting. So I did used to work for a broadcaster as well, which is quite a different approach. But generally speaking, I'm working with brands who come to them, who want to make content for their platform, and kind of advertise basically, but through content that people want to see, not just like, you don't want to feel like you're being sold at. So generally it's that. I think the term creative though is very broad. So like people do work in very different like agencies, advertising, that cover like all sorts of different topics, and even in like TV broadcasting, and you'll have creative. So it's so broad, it's super broad. Like there's a lot of different elements within that.
And is it one project at a time or working multiple?
I generally multiple. It depends. I think when you're in the pitching stage, you're normally like seeing what comes off, working on a few different things. And it depends where you are in projects. So like if you're in pre-production to a shoot and then you're shooting, that's very time intensive bit. Whereas when you're pitching, you can do a bit more. But if you're editing the shoot, you can maybe start to work on like ideas for the next thing.
Okay.
So there's usually some overlap with different things. Like not very often am I just on one thing, but it definitely happens when it's like, oh, we need to make this in 3 weeks. Then like I would literally have no other time but to like dedicate all my time to that thing. And so it depends. And
in follow up to that, how long typically would you say a project takes? Does it vary depending on the scope?
Yeah, it definitely varies. Like I think in like traditional advertising, like huge advertising companies, they can work like year to year. So like they might start working on, say, a Christmas advert the Christmas before.
Oh, wow.
And do like a full year. And those people would tend to like work much more just on that one project. Whereas mine is a lot more, I guess, like nimble. It's wild sometimes because say the Women's World Cup is coming up. People have known about this World Cup for like 4 years.
Yeah,
minimum,
of course.
right?
Yeah.
But people only start to like think about it way too late. So it'll be like a few months to go and they're like, oh, we want to do all this stuff. And then they'll still kind of like faff about for a bit. And then a month before they're like, okay, yeah, quick, let's make something.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, you mentioned the fact that you've always been in sports. Was that a decision because like you love sports, or was it just you wound up there at the beginning and you've just stayed there because you kind of enjoy it?
Probably a bit of both. Like I think I didn't study to be a creative, but I was in the creative world. So I was a graphic designer, so traditionally an art director. So I probably would have been in a traditional creative team. I would have been the art side. However, I've always been a writer as well, and that's always been like a big part of my process. And so when I realized that I could do both things together, that made a lot of sense for me. When I was more doing like traditional graphic design, I started to make a project for myself because there was like no women's sports stuff around. And I started to get frustrated, like as a sports fan, that I genuinely couldn't find like information about women's sport or like football matches. Or I think it's very hard even today to like appreciate that was the case, like not that long ago.
Yeah.
I started a newsletter in, I don't know what year it is, 2016 maybe, 2015.
Oh, wow, a while ago.
Yeah, and just because I wanted to like show more women's sports stuff, show that like this stuff was out there, like fill a need basically that I saw.
And get paid to do it.
Well, at the time I wasn't. Like,
wow.
I was like, I'm just going to make this because this is what I want to see. And then that project slowly developed into like an Instagram community, a radio show, a magazine.
What was that project?
It was called Slow. So it was like a women's sport platform, basically.
Okay.
And I felt like there was no one talking about it. There was no community space. There was no one doing anything in that world. And again, like now after we've had like an amazing Euros last year, and I think it's very hard to even remember that was the case.
Yeah.
But I just felt very strongly that I wanted to see this stuff in the world. And so I made it. And so off the back of that, I started to have brands ask me to consult on stuff or like come up with ideas or be part of workshops. So I started this like gradual crossover from my day job and my side project into this work, like more permanently. Yeah. So because of my side project, it ended up being sport, but that was also obviously because I loved it and like had a passion for it. And so I've just always kind of stayed in it. Like I think there's definitely times when I think, how much more can I do in football? Like, am I just rehashing like the same stuff? And but I do love it. Like I do, yeah. I think there's so many good stories. There's so many like things that you can tell. And
is that the main thing you're doing? Like when you say that there wasn't a lot of exposure, was there not a lot of exposure into like the athletes' background stories, where they're from, and just not knowing who they are?
Yeah.
Or like the result on a Saturday, as an example?
Everything really. Like you could find out the result from Googling and stuff. Like I think with men's football, it's always been there for me. Like the apps send it to my phone. Like, you know, every day the Premier League is like coming up on my phone. There was nothing like that you could just feel connected to it quite instantly. You had to go looking. And I wanted to make a space where people could just know everything and feel like, so in the newsletter, like early days, I would like go to matches, on my own or with a friend, and we would like take our own photos. I would write about the match.
Wow.
We would like, then in the newsletter, I would like say results from the last week. I would talk about what was coming up next week, because there was nowhere that, you know, like you might find one article on this newspaper, you might find an article over here, but there was no like home for women's sport, I felt.
Oh, do you know what? I'm just going to cut you up there. I agree. And I actually follow women's sport quite a lot. I think you'll know this.
Yeah.
And I like to follow the WSL, the best WSL title race at the moment, might I just add. And yeah, when you go onto BBC Sport, it's like you click football and you got to go right to the end.
Yeah.
And then you see women's maybe.
Yeah.
Or like I'd have to find an article which is dedicated to women's football and click the link that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's definitely been improvement. But for someone like me who has actually followed it for a few years, I can understand your frustrations at not being able to easily get access to that information.
Yeah, it's still actively tough, right? Like it's come so far, but it's still like a world away from like what we're used to. And it's still obviously separate. It's like football, cricket, rugby, like whatever it is, all of these sports, and then it's like women's.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And I do feel like you only really hear about like the top teams and the women's where they're doing well. So like I see articles on women's rugby, like I think they just won the Grand Slam because they won every game, but I couldn't tell you what Ireland ladies did. I couldn't tell you what Scotland ladies did.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I think with women's, it's very much a focus on success. Whereas with men, you hear about this relegation battle, this person going through this trauma. We hear about the full spectrum.
Yeah.
So I think even though there is more information, it's very centralized and focused.
Yeah, 100%. And I always said like, there's this cycle of blame, I think, in women's sport. And I always felt like, why people would say there's not enough fans, and I always felt like, well, of course there's no fans. Like, what are they going to look at? Like, where do they go to find it? And their stadiums are like hours away from the home, you know, the men's home. Do you know what I mean? So it's like you can't blame these people for not showing up for the sport, because we make it really difficult for them and we make it really hard to follow. So that's definitely where like the driving force came for me from like the original time. And I think a lot more people are doing stuff now and making their own stuff, and a lot of bigger corporations like the Telegraph started their own women's sport section, and people started to do stuff like broadcast is so much better. And then I think I stopped my own project because it felt like stuff was shifting in the right way finally. It wasn't like, even though there's so much further to go, I think for me personally, I felt like I'd done my bit and I wanted to kind of broaden out and maybe not just be like the women's football girl. No. I think, like, even in my day job, like there's not that many female creatives, and I'm lucky where I am now because there are a few, but I think especially at my level, there aren't that many. And so if you get a women's brief, it's very easy for people to be like, oh, give it to Ro, she's a woman. And actually, like, I am interested in other like sport and
they've almost pigeonholed you.
Yeah. So I think it's been like an amazing kind of position to be in and start for my career, but I definitely started to feel like I need to like broaden out and not just because I have so many other interests as well.
So you've just touched upon people not being at your level and what you do on a day-to-day. For the listener, senior creative director, what does a typical day look like in the life of Rosanna?
It's so varied, but I think like it depends where you are on a project. So I might be like coming up with ideas. I might have like had a new brief in and I need to come up with ideas in the next couple of days to pitch back to them. Once I've come up with the ideas, I would need to like put them into a deck so that people can kind of like start to visualize it, and you don't just like give them a written description. Like you want to make them like feel it and know what, if they bought into this, they can really feel like what you would make for them. So then it might be like having that meeting to pitch them the ideas. If we have won a pitch and we're going to make it, then it might be in pre-production working with like a producer, like various people on different teams that will come together to kind of like start that pre-production process and make sure that we can shoot it where we want, how we want, with the right talent. And then we might be shooting. Like it's definitely a smaller part of my job, because much more of it is like trying to win that work, or it's not like I'm shooting every other week.
Yeah.
But if we're on a shoot, you know, then it might be like half a day, it might be 3 days, just depending on like what the final deliverable is. And then once we've shot it, if I'm in post-production, then it would be overseeing the edit so that we know that it looks how we want it to look.
Yeah.
Working with whoever originally bought into it, like whatever brand it is, that they're happy with it throughout that process, and then for it to go on the final platform. But I would say like a lot more of my job, I make a lot of decks. Like I make a lot of, like I'm in Keynote a lot.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of my job is writing, actually. Like for me personally, I always think through writing. So when I'm coming up with ideas, I have to do like pen and paper and just like think it out with like in a very manual way. And then say for like maybe like a 60-second advert or something, I would script it. So like that needs to be written. You need to check that the brand is happy with that we're not saying anything that they don't want to say, or it tells the story that you want. Or so actually, and even in like a deck, because you're pitching, you have to be good at writing, you have to be good at selling it. So yeah, writing's definitely a big part of it as well throughout.
And I suppose just to kind of piggyback on top of that, what would you say the key skills are required for your role? So you've mentioned writing there. I suppose for yourself and maybe other people you work with, what would you say their main attributes are? Is there a common theme across the people?
I think like why I realised I was actually better at this job than say like when I was a graphic designer, or is because I'm much better at the holistic vision and like coming up with an idea kind of out of nowhere, or like through bits of stuff that you've seen or from various things, coming up with that idea and being able to like envisage what that looks like at the end. And I think when I was designing, it was very like, I worked out quite quickly that I was designing other people's ideas.
Yeah.
And I wasn't as good at the executing. Like other people are much better at that than me. And I think being able to see from like just this tiny spark of an idea what that could look like in 60 seconds or 5 minutes or is quite a tough skill, and definitely like something that is essential. But I think also like something that I find a lot in my industry is a lot of creative people are neurodivergent in some way. So I think...
What does neurodivergent mean for the listener?
It might be that you have dyslexia, it might be that you're dyspraxic, it might be dyscalculia, it might be Tourette's is associated with creativity, it might be ADHD, it might be ASD. So like all of these different ways that people's brains work, I think I've noticed a lot that like in stuff that was very difficult for people in school comes into its own like in the creative industry.
Okay, great.
So I'm always surprised like when I speak to people and they're like, oh yeah, I actually have this thing, or like, and I notice it all the time with a lot of people are dyslexic, and I think it's just cool that like it seems to be a thread that like a lot of creatives' brains just kind of work in a different way, however, like whatever way that is.
I will just say, this doesn't mean that you need to be dyslexic to work in the creative industry.
I'm not dyslexic.
No, that's what I'm saying. But just to be clear to the listener, but this is something that you found amongst, not that they're dyslexic, but that there could be some neurodivergence.
I think it's a nice quality, like, and a nice thread that I often find in creative people, because I think sometimes stuff at school, like that, you know, kids might find hard, or you kind of think, how am I ever going to like get a job, or how would I work in a structured way, or like how would I, and I think it's nice to see that like in this industry a lot of those people thrive in that way.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and the neurodivergent like covers so many different things, and I think a lot of people would like kind of find themselves somewhere in, you know, because all of our brains work so differently. But I think what was really comforting to me, it felt like actually the ways in which my brain maybe didn't work in certain structures or in certain 9-to-5s or actually thrive in this industry.
Okay, that's great. And you've mentioned structure there. So I suppose that leads me nicely into what's the work-life balance like Is it something where, like you said, just because of the way you are, it feels quite natural? Is it typically 9 to 5 because you're shooting? Is it, 9 to 9, 9 to 10? Does it vary?
Yeah.
What's it like for you?
Yeah, it varies a lot. I think I consider my work-life balance to be good. I think typically in big advertising agencies, it's notoriously worse, and they're much more like overworked. And I think at least like historically, I don't know what it's like so much now, but I think we definitely have like peaks and troughs. And I think for a really long time, I was freelance, and I think that worked really well for me because I quite like those peaks and troughs. So some weeks you might work 60 hours because you're like trying to work to a deadline or whatever, and everything feels hectic and you don't have time to eat lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
But then the next week you're like, when's the next thing? What's happening? Like, it's really chill. So I think even though the work-life balance is not 9 to 5, like it's not always you start at this time and you finish at this time.
Yeah.
But I think that works well for me because it always feels like it balances out across the course of like however long. I don't mind like not finishing at 5 some days, but also some days like I don't feel very creative. So if I want to like slack off for 3 hours, then I might need to do that.
Yeah, and obviously we live in like a new age with, the big C and work from home, work from the office. Being a creative, where do you do your best work? Is it thinking alone at home? Is it in the office with others? How do you like to work? Do you like a hybrid of both?
Yeah, I think I need a hybrid, but I only ever like do my work at home.
Oh,
like,
really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
I go to the office to chat. I love to chat.
Yeah.
I just go around everyone and have a little chat because I love people. Like, I love chatting to people. I love finding out about people.
I'm very similar.
Yeah, but then like I get half the day through and I'm like, I've literally done nothing.
Yeah.
But it is also useful then like, if you have meetings in person or you bounce stuff off other people, because I think sometimes working alone, and this is why sometimes creative teams are quite good because you're always bouncing between each other, whereas I'm on my own. So it is nice to come in, maybe chat to my boss about something. Like if I'm at a point in a project where I'm struggling with something, I'm like, I've got this idea, but I'm not quite sure how it works. And then I'm talking to him about it, and 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I've got it. Like that makes sense now. So I definitely need that human contact time as well, like to kind of keep moving forward. When I'm at home for too long on my own, I definitely start to like get in my head. But if I'm writing, I can't listen to anything else. I can't hear anyone else. Like I need to be in a silent room just writing. So yeah, I definitely need a balance. I'm like 2 days in the office, 3 days at home.
I'm the same.
Then,
Do you have a choice on which days you go in?
We try and do like a Wednesday all together, which is nice because then you're like, oh, it's all my guys and like we're all here. Some people go in every day, like some people are up for it every day, but I know that I would never get any work done.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. And obviously I know that you love what you do and you speak about it with such passion, and I love that. What's the most enjoyable thing about being a creative in your opinion?
I think seeing something that you thought of, like just this little idea. Sometimes when I'm explaining ideas to people, it's frustrating because I'm like, okay, just think about this. And then it goes like this. And then you're doing this. And they're like, can you show me something that I'm like, no, because it's in my head. Yeah. And being able to see like that thing from my head turn into like a 30-second video or a minute or, whatever it is really cool to like have that, like, how did that one little spark of thought become this thing? Because it feels so organic. And I think always being across that whole process is really important to me. I really hate leaving a project. When I was freelance, sometimes I would have to leave a project early and I hate not having like the whole thing. So I think, yeah, seeing little things come to fruition is really cool.
And is there a particular project when you think about like the happiness that comes from it coming to fruition, is there one that sticks out above the rest? You're like, I'm so glad that I did this one and I worked on this. There's
a few different things, like at different levels, but I still think it was a while ago now, but in, what was it, 2021? At the broadcaster I worked at before, they bought the Women's Champions League rights, and we launched that as like almost a celebration of like, we're launching this thing and this is where you can watch it. And it felt like such a massive moment for me, coming from like going myself to take pictures on on my phone or whatever it was, on a camera in Bristol, to watch Bristol City play Man City, and actually no one knew any of the Man City players, which is wild to think. Do you know what I mean? To be able to like
11 now.
yeah, to be able to like make a promotion that will be seen by hundreds of thousands of people that says like, this is where women's football is at now, I think was like quite a big moment for me.
Amazing. And we've spoken about the highs. What would you say the most stressful or challenging part of being a creative is?
I think being creative on demand, like when I have to come up in 2 days with however many ideas, and that pressure of like, you don't always feel good or creative, or do you know what I mean? But you can't leave it. You can't say, I'll do it in 4 days because I might feel more creative then.
Yeah.
And I think that pressure of having to be creative on demand sometimes is a lot, especially if like there's other stuff going on in your life, or like, but you have to come up with ideas. Like, what are you going to make? What's exciting? And you have to like feel good about it. So yeah, I think being creative on demand and not getting stuff made, like when you like come up with an idea and you're so excited about it and you're like, oh, I really want to make this, and then someone either doesn't buy it, or you can't get the talent, or it doesn't come off, and you obviously can't make it without that money, so you feel like, oh, that's never going to get made. And like we always talk, like I think a lot of creatives have like a locker of stuff that they always think about that like they wish they'd got made. But you always draw on that, like that's still ideas that you like draw from, and there might be a brief in another year that you think like,
you can put
yeah, like maybe this would kind of work here. And so it never feels wasted, but there's a bit of you that like sinks when you've got so excited about it and you've sold it in and you've been like, oh my God, this would be amazing. And then they're like, oh yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
So I'm just going to go back a little bit. You said that the most difficult thing is being creative on demand. And I think like I can resonate with that. How do you overcome that? So what would your advice be to people who are in a similar position to you and have to be creative on demand? Like you said, if things have to be made, they have to be made. Is there like a process you follow, or do you just crumble? I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here, but it'd be great to kind of hear how you deal with that adversity and I suppose come through the other side. Yeah,
I think I have faith and I trust in the fact that like it always happens. I've never not come up with ideas. I've never gone with a blank page and been like, sorry guys, nothing happened in my brain today. Like, what can you do?
Yeah.
I think partly that pressure of time does also make me a bit creative, because I'm like, I might have 2 days and then I come up with all the ideas in the last 20 minutes. Like that's just sometimes how it happens. So I think I know even if I faff about all day, I just remember somehow I always seem to make this happen. I always seem to come up with something. So I think like just trusting in myself that I can do that I remember that is like something I've been doing. I think like going outside and like getting out of my space so that I'm not just like going mad in one place is useful. And I think just watching different things and like there's always something else that can like spark something. So I think if I'm really struggling, like I'm like, you know what? I am just going to lie here and look at TikToks, and then maybe like that actually might spark something, or like we're lucky that in my job, like lying down and looking at TikTok can sometimes be like research or like good food, you know what I mean? So if I'm having a really tough one, like, yeah, I'm going to just do that because that's what I need to do. And then I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I forgot about this thing that, and then it sparks something that like gets you going. But I also think as someone that struggles with like procrastinating, I don't get anything done unless I have a timer on. So I use this app.
Oh my God, I'm exactly the same. Sorry, really? But talk about the app and then I'm going to come back.
So I have this app called, it's like Bear Timer or like something.
Yeah.
And it's like the Pomodoro method, if you know that. It's like the Pomodoro method. It's like I think they had like a tomato, I don't know. Anyway, it's like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes break. But this like little bear app, I mean, one, it's cute, it's a little bear on my phone, and then it like plays white noise and you have to turn the phone over for the timer to start. So I can't, and every time you pick your phone up, the timer pauses.
Oh wow.
And just having white noise in the background and knowing all I have to do is think for 25 minutes. Like, come on, like that's not that hard. And so I don't get any work done. Like I can faff all day and forget about the timer and then be like, right, I'm putting the timer on, this is out of control. And then I'll come up with stuff.
And does that stop like notifications coming through as well, that app and stuff like that? So it kind of blanks
it's
out.
just like 25 minutes of like
that's
blackout.
sick.
Yeah, it's so good. I honestly don't do any work unless, and yet every day I forget about the app and I'm stressing. And then I'm like, oh, why don't I just use the app?
Do you know, I'm exactly the same. Like, I don't know how much to say about my work, but like, I could work on a project that's due in a month, but I don't do. The best work comes 2 days before.
Always.
Like, or do you know what? I was working on a workshop, and my best is when you have like a weekly catch up with like team members. Your best work comes in the 2 hours before you've got to catch up with the rest of the team and show them what you've done. Do you know what I mean?
Always.
So I think what really helps for me is having regular touch points and keeping yourself accountable.
Yeah.
Because even when I was at university, I was like a last minute crammer. But without those checkpoints getting you to kind of manage your progress, I do think I would struggle as well.
100%. And I think I can accept now that I've always been like that. Like, even at school, like doing my GCSEs, a lot of mine were coursework because they were creative. My best mate will tell you, like, we had to do it together over like 48 hours, like before the deadline, overnight, because I'd had all year, but like it's not how I work.
Yeah,
and I think like accepting that and not trying to force yourself into like a way of working that will not work for you, but then also like making those touch points. Like for me, if I'm like, oh God, I've got to come up with 3 ideas and I can't, and then I'm like, okay, just come up with one. Like by this time, just come up with one. Then you've done one. Like, and I think I do the same probably intuitively now, so that I'm not so overwhelmed about 3. I'm like, just come up with like a few lines of something. And then
you break it down.
Yeah. Then I chill out a bit more.
I like that. Break it down. Don't be overwhelmed. And just take it step by step.
Yeah.
I'm exactly the same. Do you feel fairly compensated for what you do? I don't like to ask about actual money, but you know what you earn. You know the hours you work. Do you feel fairly compensated?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. I think it took me a while, especially coming into the industry a bit sideways and freelance. And I didn't really have any mates that were doing the same job at the time. So there was no one I could really ask. So at first I definitely found it hard because I was like, I know what I got paid as a designer. I kind of know roughly, but this world I'm not sure about. And so I had to kind of guess at first. And I think as I've gone, and in my last job, I had a colleague who was really good at kind of like guiding me. You know, if I asked like, is this fair? Do you think, then that was really useful. But at first it was difficult to feel that, like I just had no idea if I was being fairly compensated.
Yep.
And then I think I just had to ask questions. I just like got comfortable with like trying to find out. And so I definitely do now. And I think...
Who do you ask the questions to?
Like people above me, or like, like if you trust them, if they're not like your boss, you can't ask your boss. Do you know what I mean?
No, but like, I'm just clarifying. Yeah. So you're not actually asking your boss.
There's like someone a bit more sideways above, or like also if there are people that you're like mates with in HR that can kind of roughly tell you, they're not going to tell you what this X person gets paid, but they might tell you like a better range, or that you should be aiming for. I think it took me a while. I think even now, being one of the only women, and especially in previous jobs, have been the only woman at my level. Yeah. I definitely think like, what's that guy getting paid? Yeah. Like, is he getting paid? Do you know what I mean? Because it's hard to know. Like I work with a lot of amazing men. Like I don't think I'm getting mugged off, but it's with like the gender pay gap.
So you would, sorry to jump in here. So even now, you wouldn't really know whether your male counterpart is on the same as you, way more than you. Okay, that leads me nicely into my next question. Are you take a pay rise, so you wait until they say, Ro, great job, pay rise, or you go and get, and you're like, hey, I think I'm doing a great job, where's my increase?
I think because I was freelance for quite a while, and then I went into more like fixed term stuff, because I've mostly been freelance, it was easier to kind of say, this is my day rate. Like, I think in the freelance world, it's a bit different. People are like, okay, that's your day rate. Do you know what I mean? There's less like, they might say, listen, we have a budget and this project, and can you do it for this? But they kind of take you at face value in freelance. And then I think, so going into salaries, it was quite foreign to me. So I haven't really had that chance yet to be like, I have in negotiating the initial, but I haven't really stayed anywhere long enough to ask for a raise.
Yeah, I get you.
But I definitely more now think about it and think, just because I've never been in that pattern, it's not normal to me.
I'm really going to put you on the spot here. Don't hate me for it. So I know you've not been in that pattern yet. How long, for the listener, before you ask for one? Would it be a year? Would it be 18 months? Would it be after like a sick project where you've proved yourself?
I definitely think a sick project where you proved yourself helps.
Would you wait a year to ask for a salary increase if you knew that your male counterpart was earning 20k more than you?
Absolutely not. Like, I'd obviously be fuming and I'd be right in there. Like, I wouldn't be able to help myself. I definitely don't think they are earning 20k more than me. Like, I think if it was 2k, I still might wait the year.
Okay.
And if it was 2k, I might say, like, what else do you need from me? I try and ask, like, in my check-ins, like, with my boss, which actually I've never had before, to be fair. I never had one-to-ones. And I've really enjoyed that process of, like, what else do you need from me? Like, what else can I do? Because I've never had that before.
Yeah.
So it might be more of a conversation if it was less, but yeah, 20k is a lot of money. Like,
No, that makes sense. So to come back, asking for a salary increase, you think yearly is about the right time though? Yeah,
and I think it's very difficult at the moment because everything in life has gone up so much, and the yearly increase that, like, people are increasing salaries absolutely does not match that. So
it's facts.
I think it'll be interesting if I'm where I'm at now in a year to know how I feel about, like, I'm not someone that would really just, like, accept, well, this is the annual increase. I think I managed to get to where I wanted to be a bit quicker by being freelance and just going for what I wanted. Yeah. But it's hard. Like, I feel I've never had to do that conversation before. I've never had to do. So even then, like, I feel like I'd be like, right, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to go for. But ask me in a year, like, I might be like, oh shit, I don't want to ask. Like, it's hard.
You heard it here first. I'm gonna ask you in a year. Yeah. Maybe we'll do like a little segment. 1 year later,
I went for 20k more.
Did Ro get her money? Yeah. I want to talk about freelance versus a salary job. But before I do that, if anyone from our work is listening and you just want to give me a little pay increase,
I mean,
just do it. Just do it.
I'll take it.
I ain't been there a year yet, but just do it, okay? No, I'm messing around. But yeah, back to it. Freelance versus a salaried role. What do you prefer? What are the pros and cons of both?
I pretty much was always freelance. Like, I think that worked very well for me and my brain. Like, I enjoy being in charge of my own time. I very much hate, like, feeling managed sometimes, or I think I haven't maybe always had the best management relationships, so I think I didn't know always what good management could look like. So I think freelance felt easier in that way. I could just leave something after a project if I wanted to. However, as I've got more into it, freelance became a bit harder because I felt like I wasn't able to get stuck into the bigger stuff and the bigger projects more. I wasn't there and ready when that stuff came in. I would just be more brought in, like, last minute as a freelancer. So I kind of felt like I needed to stay somewhere for longer and be able to give myself the chance to, like, make different stuff, make bigger stuff, rather than jumping about. But I find it very hard, to be honest. Like, I'm very freelance minded, and I think my brain is always looking for the next thing and the next exciting thing, and so I find it very difficult to, like, stay in one place. And yeah.
Okay, what about, because I've never done freelance, I've always been in a salaried role, like holiday. So paid holiday versus any time as a freelancer, you're not working, you're not getting paid. healthcare, benefits. Do you see the positives, I suppose, of being in a stable income where you can enjoy some of those benefits versus having to watch the pennies and knowing that when you're not working, you're not earning?
100%. Like, and that was a big part of feeling like I was ready to be somewhere as well, because I'm older now. Like, I have more responsibilities. I have to know what's coming in. In the pandemic, I lost all of my work. So that was such a difficult period of time that there's definitely a bit of trauma there that I feel like I never want to go back to that. I never want to be feeling like I've got nothing coming in. Equally, like, as a freelancer, I could probably be earning more right now as long as I was getting enough work. But those things pay off for me. Like, I do want to just go on holiday and feel chill and not feel like, oh, has anyone emailed me? When's the next job coming in? I just want to go on holiday and drink a margarita and chill out. Do you know what I mean? And not like have to think about that. Yeah. And that's been really nice. It's been really nice to know I can cover my rent and mortgage. I can cover like whatever else I need to. Yeah. When that wasn't always the case. And especially because I'm not very good at numbers. Like, I'm not very good at the way that I was freelance. If you have invoices pile up, you might be getting paid 15 grand one month, but then you might not get any money for 4 months. And being able to manage that is very difficult. And it's definitely not just because I was good at being freelance. I absolutely wasn't good at that bit of being freelance. Yeah, of course. And so that was so stressful month to month. Like, am I going to be able to do that? Some months I'd be like, oh my God, I've got so much money, go and blow it on like absolutely stupid shit. And then in 3 months be like, where'd all that money go? Yeah.
Okay, so massive question then. Hopefully there's a lot of potential freelancers who are listening to this. What would be your advice to them in terms of, like, whether it be, make sure you save your money, do your taxes? What would be like the 3 key things for any freelancer to consider when?
So it's not just save your money, it's put your tax money aside. Put it somewhere you can't get it. When HMRC comes for you, you want to have that money ready to go, because it is so stressful getting your tax bill and being like, where the hell am I going to find 8 grand from? Because you've spent it all because you didn't think like at some point that's coming for me. Yeah. And I think I would definitely do that now, but like when I was younger, no one teaches you that stuff. No one says like, if you go freelance and you charge by the day and you invoice them, like that's how it works. You have to put it aside.
So then another question, you know how you're like, freelancers typically get paid more than a salaried job. Do you actually get paid more than if you're having to shove all of this money away for tax?
Maybe not. Like it obviously all evens out. And again, like maybe you get paid marginally more, but do you want the stress of not having holiday, or do you want to have to do your own taxes, or do you want to have to pay an accountant? You know, like even though it's probably technically more, there are other benefits that aren't just financial that you have to take into consideration, including like stress and like how good your life is, like how stressful that is, how that pattern works for you. So I think typically by a day rate, it looks like you get paid more, but there are a lot of other things to like take into consideration.
Any other tips before we move on?
So what was my first? Okay, put tax money aside. Put on your invoices, I will charge you if you don't pay me within 28 days. 28 days is the amount of time you have to pay me. If you don't pay me in that time, I'm going to charge you. And as soon as you put that on the bottom of your invoice, because that's legal, like legally you can do that, then people start paying you on time.
I think this is a big one, you know, because I know a lot of people who don't get invoices paid on time. So,
and I'm going to charge you now. Like if you're late, I'm going to charge you. I don't have time for that.
Is it a late charge fee? Is it like every day is late?
It's a percentage on, and then I think it's a fee. There's like really easy, if you just Google it, there's really easy advice. And people have just copy pasted like basically a T&Cs like that you can put on your invoice. As soon as you start putting that on, people manage to pay you on time.
Amazing.
So that's my second one. My third one is keep your portfolio up to date, because it's so long doing it when you don't have it up to date. And when you have it, just email people, like contact people. You might get nothing, but you might get something, like someone that you never thought would reply to you might be like, oh my God, I loved this bit of work. And they might not have a job for you, but like you might connect. And then later down the line, you know, like being freelance is all about connections. And I think that can be very hard for some people, but as soon as you build that resilience and as soon as you're like making that network and like, I remember it's like this cheesy quote, my network is my net worth. And when you're freelance, it absolutely is. Because
that's a fact.
whoever you know, like that person's going to give you a job or they're going to recommend you to someone else. So just make sure that you don't want to like be annoying, but just like keep up with people, be interested in them. Like, don't just make it about you, but like, what have they been up to? What is their work like at the moment? Like keeping that healthy network is like very important.
Amazing. So you touched upon, you took a sideways step, right? You were an art director, now you're a creative. What does that transition process look like? And I suppose, let's take a step back. Like, how have you gotten to this point, and what do you think it is that has made you as successful as you are?
I think initially I had to blag some stuff, definitely. Like,
fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Some good old fake it
absolutely,
till you make it.
Like, no one really knows what they're doing, to be honest. Like, and everyone has imposter syndrome for a reason, because like everyone's kind of making it up, especially in this industry.
True.
Like, don't stress about it, because everyone's doing the same thing. There were definitely days when I first had this kind of job where I'd be like, people would say, can you concept blah blah blah, and I'd be like, yeah, sure, and not know what anything meant. Or people would like use shoot terms and I'd be like, what the fuck does that mean? And then I'd just go and Google it. Like, it's fine, like, just, you know. And at the same time, if you don't know something, it's absolutely fine. Just ask people. Like, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to think, but put yourself in positions that you want to be in, and you'll work it out. Like, if you want to be there and you want to make that stuff, and you're going to work it out, you're going to be fine.
So you said fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
What else has made you be successful and get you to where you've become?
I can't believe my first one is fake it.
Maybe we could
initially fake it till you make it. I think my deep interest in people, like, I am so interested in people. I'm so interested in every single detail about people. Like, I find it hard in my personal life sometimes because I'm just naturally so interested in people. I want to know like what you had for breakfast. I want to know how your mum is. I want to know like what it is you do in the morning before anyone sees you. I want to know like how you get to work. I want to, all of that stuff is genuinely interesting to me, and it's not for everyone else.
It is for me.
Yeah, and I get that. Like, I think not everyone cares about every single detail about people, but I think that's maybe better at my job, because no matter who it is, if it's a footballer or you want to find those things to connect on. Like, the more you connect to someone, the better you're going to get from them, the more story you're going to get from them, the more natural it's going to be. And I think it's very hard to fake that genuine interest. And so being curious, being interested in people, like, is such a massive, I think, part of my job and why I'm good at it.
A couple of questions. Did you go to university?
I did. I studied graphic design.
Okay, so you studied graphic design. Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't go to university initially. Like, I didn't do A-levels. I dropped out.
Okay.
And I just waitressed for a long time, and I was working in a shop until I was 21. And I think for me, that time is really important because I found school quite difficult, and I was interested in so many things, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to just go uni to like work it out. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to know that I wanted to do something there.
Yeah.
And because I didn't do A-levels, I had to go a different route. But I think that time for me was really important. I'm glad I didn't rush that. I'm glad I didn't just force myself in somewhere and go off and do it. I think I needed that time. I needed to earn money. I needed to like just work stuff out personally before, just feeling committed to something. And I don't think I ever would have got to graphic design had I not done that. And therefore wouldn't have got here. Do you know what I mean? Even though I'm not doing graphic design now, I think those steps, like, as you're working it out as you go, like, are very important to just let yourself take your time. And I think it's so tough for kids now because they have to stay in school till 18, but they have to feel like they know like what they, and I definitely felt that pressure. But ultimately, if you go and get a degree, no one actually gives as soon as you've got that bit of paper, no one's ever asked me what I got. No one ever, do you know what I mean? So like,
it's true.
And I think uni as well it's such a shame because it's so expensive now. But for so many people, the best thing about it is leaving home, finding your people,
learning how to cook spag bowl.
Exactly, like standing on your own 2 feet, feeling like an adult. And I did that anyway. Like I left home at 17, like I did 18, or I don't know. But I left home, I did all of that stuff, just like working. And that was the way that I needed to do it. And I think like for some people, just going off and like rushing into uni isn't like the right way.
Okay, and then so my next question, you kind of touched upon the fact that one, you're a senior creative. Two, there aren't many like females who are maybe at your level. How did you get to your level? Because it sounds like you were freelance and now you've taken like a senior position in a company. What does that transition process look like? And yeah, how did you tackle that situation?
I think being really keen to get better, like I think because I proved myself in freelance positions, people wanted me to stay, people wanted to have me on. And I think then that was my chance to like get the title I wanted. To be honest, I was never that fussed about job titles or like what. I just have only ever wanted to like make good work and make what I want to make. But it's useful then if you get to a position where you can say I'm senior, because I think it allows you more creative control for one. But I think I was just so keen to like learn and make sure I was making stuff and make sure that people felt good about my work. I'm such a people pleaser. So like I want my boss, I want people around me to think, oh, she's really sick at her job. Like I need that as well. So I think just by like feeling to be wanted, like to want my ideas to be wanted, to want like people to want me to make stuff was a driving force in just like making better stuff. And therefore then when they're like, oh, will you stay on for a year? I'm like, okay, yeah, but this is what my role is. And this is, and I think I didn't really have to fight for that at the beginning. You know, like it was quite clear, this is the job I'm doing. I was at the level that other people were, you know, I'm obviously there. I didn't really have to fight for it. But I think it was a bit of like working out. I didn't know what midweight meant. I didn't know what a junior did. I didn't know what senior was. So I had to kind of like find but as soon as you're in it, you start to see people around you, you work it out. You're like, okay, got you. And actually, they're a creative director for a reason. I don't quite get that yet. I need to work out how to do that. I need to be better at that. And you just start to suss out your place in like.
Okay, so just to summarize there, to make sure that I've understood this and I've heard you, you were freelance. You were, let's say, on a particular project, you smashed that project out of the park, and as a result of that, you've been offered a full-time role, and based on understanding the business and the people that you worked with, you're like, okay, I'm senior creative, you know, based on the scale, and they've given you that full-time role. Yeah. Okay, great.
And how I worked out, so that was the first time that was like 4 years ago. No, less than that actually. Coming from freelance, it was probably like 3 years ago. And that was the first time that I had to say what I wanted to be paid annually. So how I did that was like work out my day rate for the amount of working days in the year. And then,
which is typically about like 260 or 280 from memory. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's 260 actually, because 52 weeks in a year, 2 weekends. Yeah. That's 100 days.
And then you take off like holiday weeks.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it's probably about 240.
Like 4 weeks. Yeah. Then you know roughly, as a freelancer, you probably wouldn't work all the days, but I just did that as like, okay, this is what my day rate works out as annual, so I'm going to ask for that. Then they'll always come back and be like, well, you wouldn't work every day, and we give you benefits. And I'm like, yeah, sure, but this is my starting point, like, and then we'll see where we get to. And also, like, what are those benefits actually? Like, are they benefits? Like, is it just like vague health insurance that I'm never going to use? Do you know what I mean? So I think that was like a way that I was able to set, okay, well, this is what I need, and like I'll just see where they get to.
Okay, amazing. This has been great so far, can I just say? I'm just taking a moment. So you've touched upon the fact that, you know, you like to learn. What do you do to keep your finger on the pulse as to, like the best, I suppose, creative techniques, and to make sure you're always improving? Are you reading books? Are you watching YouTube, listening to podcasts? What is your way of continuously learning?
I think for me, like, I'm not very good at keeping up with, like, I don't watch all of the football content. Do you know what I mean? Like, I work in it a lot. So, like, some people are obsessed with it. Some people want to, like, work in it and watch it all the time. I see stuff on Instagram come up, but for me, like, it's not the biggest point of inspiration. Like, just seeing what our equivalent publishers do, like, it's good to know, but like, I'm not that bothered about it. I follow a lot of different directors, and I like to see like what they make, and in other fields, like it might not be football, but like what's that director doing that I liked? What have they made recently? That's a big way that I think I find inspiration. I think also definitely trying to put myself in positions creatively that will bring other influence. So like going to an exhibition, I always find that if I just put myself in that space, I might not even love it, but like it always makes me think about stuff differently. I always think, and just reading about that person that made the work, or like, it just brings different stuff into my head. And I don't think the best stuff is ever going to come into my head just by like watching 30-second TikToks. Like, it's not, I think, watching films, because I think like longer films, and I love storytelling. I love going to the cinema on my own just to like.
Favorite film?
Oh, favorite film. It's so jokes, but it's not like a good one for storytelling. But the film that I've probably watched the most is Bridesmaids, because when I just want to like proper switch off and laugh and feel like good, I put Bridesmaids on.
I think so. I've watched that film only once. But the scene where they run across the road and she has to sit down in the road to do her business, that will stay with me for the rest of my life. I will never forget that scene.
It's so good.
Ridiculous. Yeah,
and actually, that's another, like, Kirsten Wiig in that film. I watch a lot of her old SNL sketches, and like all of the SNL people from that time, I love watching their comedy and like how they write and think and create characters, and like even that stuff, like I find very inspiring. Actually, another good film I saw recently and a good book was Women Talking, which was more narrative, and just, it was good to read the book first and then see the film. But that was like really inspiring, and just pretty, it's a tough watch, but like I think the power of that like story and the way that they brought it to life was amazing.
So you take a lot of inspiration from film, TV, like art galleries, and then you touched upon writing. So do you read a lot of books, or some books even? Any amount is more than me, I think.
Honestly, like I need to read more, because me and my mate Amy always joke about how we read 2 books a year, and that's on holiday. Like, and we'll like pack our books, and we'll be like, oh, look at me with my book going on holiday. But I definitely try. I love reading so much. I think I just get so busy that I forget about it. So I have to keep bringing it back into my routine.
I'm
and
about to
making
invest in a Kindle.
I love a Kindle. And I think, so I love reading. Like, I love reading books, but I definitely don't read enough. I like writing. I try and write. I don't do, again, like I get out of the routine, but like for a while, and especially at like busier times, I find writing 3 pages in the morning of just like, as soon as I get up, of just like constant stream of thoughts.
So you do 3 pages. I've got a friend who journals for 10 minutes.
Really?
So different techniques, but he says,
I find it creatively really helps, like all of that stuff that I've been like taking in, and helps to kind of come into different ideas when I write through it in the morning. And I definitely notice when I don't do that for too long, I get frustrated about like why I'm not feeling creative, and also if I sit 5 nights in a row and watch Married at First Sight, and I don't read a book, and I don't watch anything else, and then I'm not really going to be at my most creative. Like, so I have to. It's still a practice. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think creativity is a practice, and I think it's very easy it's very easy to get lazy about it. It's very easy to just like get in our routines, but every time I like step out of that routine and I practice and I bring myself back to like taking myself outside of my own world, I never regret it. I always think like, oh my God, why don't I do this more? Why don't I do everything more? Because it always brings something. Like, it always brings something to me.
All right. Final few questions before we do a quick fire round and conclude. First one is, do you have a mentor?
I don't at the moment. I did for a while. I used to go to this networking thing called Future Girl Corp, which was all about kind of helping more women to become like future CEOs. And when I was making the women's sport project that I was telling you about, I had a mentor called Sharmadine Reed, who is an amazing businesswoman. And she heard about my idea and she connected with me, and she was like really helpful in like shaping that idea. And I got a lot from that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think it would probably be good for me to have one now. And I also have found mentoring or like starting to manage other people, which is something that you don't get freelance, has been very good for me, because I think people who are more junior, like, it's very good for you to have to articulate like to them, like, okay, how are you thinking about this? Why do we do it like this? It kind of, again, takes you out of your like process, and helping someone else to like get there helps you as well. And also just like they have different points of reference. It's always interesting like seeing what they're referencing, what they're watching. So yeah, I would like to do more of it. Like I would like to maybe like find another mentor, or you know,
or do some mentoring yourself.
Yeah, but I don't at the moment.
Okay, that makes sense. And then just last thing, you know, we've spoken a lot about work-life balance, where you get your creativity from. Obviously work can be stressful. How do you unwind? And how do you take your mind off when you completely want to switch off maybe from being creative and you just want to be Ro?
I think like I find it very hard to switch off. So I do love going to the cinema on my own, because if I watch a film at home, I can be on my phone half the time.
Yeah.
But if I go to the cinema and there's no one even to talk to, that is like 2 hours where I'm fully just like in that thing. I find it very mindful that like I'm just there and I'm just watching that thing.
It's like a life-size bear app. So rather than having to switch the phone off, they tell you
all I can do is watch this film.
Yeah.
And I find that like very useful for me.
Okay.
I love to run. Like I think if I don't exercise enough, if I don't like get those endorphins enough, my brain is not as creative. So I have to be like definitely conscious of that. If I'm not fitting it in enough, I start to go a bit mental.
Yeah.
I walk my dog a lot, so I like get those steps in, get the fresh air, and see my mates. Like I think just like reminding yourself that it's not just work, like, and talking to other people about their jobs and like how was their day, and you know, all of my mates have such different jobs and that all of their days look so different.
Yeah.
That reminding yourself it's not just like, oh God, we have to make this shoot happen, and you know, just like being with your people and reminding yourself that there's like actually a lot more to enjoying life, is like you need to do it a lot. You need to like keep those human like connections up.
Amazing. Right, this has been sick. Thank you so much. Before we
Thank
go,
you.
I'd just like to do a quick fire round, okay, for the fans to get to know you. So I'm going to look at my phone for this. Work from home or work from the office?
Home. I do need both, but too much chat.
Money or happiness?
Oh, happiness, but that's because I can say that because I'm not in poverty. Like money contributes. Okay. Like
favorite day of the week?
Thursday.
Love that. Thursday.
Yeah.
Time in a group or time alone?
Oh, again, I need both, but I think in a group if I had to pick.
Travel to the past or travel to the future?
Oh, I mean, the future's looking a bit bleak, but bits of the past were not great either. You know what I think I would do? I would go to like the early 90s.
Okay.
But I would not be the age I was. I would be like in my early 20s, and I would just like be in the proper rave scene and go, and like experience
all
that,
I want
like,
to do is do it.
Exactly. But like experience it for what that would have been like. Do you know what I mean?
Rather than Kevin and Perry go large, it'd be Ro and I don't even know, Ro and Ro's big one. No, I'm joking. Okay, love that. Favorite book?
Women Talking, that I talked about earlier, is so good.
Mm-hmm. Night out or night in? I feel like I've kind of asked this, but
night in.
I love this. Who has it easier, men or women?
Obviously men.
Obviously
men.
And yeah, obviously this is a podcast. Are you listening to any good podcasts at the moment?
I struggle a bit with podcasts just because I often listen to them. I listen to them when I drive, but also when I go to sleep. So sometimes they make me sleepy now because I've made this pattern of like listening to podcasts when I go to sleep. But I listened to one the other week called It's Deep Read with Phoebe Lovett, and she talks to kind of like big thinkers and writers, and I listened to the one with Oliver Berkman, and his book is called 4,000 Hours, and it's about productivity actually, and like getting things done, and actually it reminded me that podcasts sometimes are, because off the back of that I bought his audiobook, and when I listened to the book I thought, do you know what? I actually think I got everything I needed from that podcast. So it reminded me that sometimes podcasts are like just good ways to like get snapshots into people's ways of thinking, and without having to feel like you have to commit to like a whole book or so yeah, I enjoyed that one.
Okay, we can link that in the show notes. Okay, so obviously this is the first episode of the What My Best Friend Does podcast.
Does that mean I'm your ultimate best mate?
I mean, TBC, but we're going to start a closing tradition, okay, on the pod, and this is going to be the first time I ask it. So, based on everything that you know now, right, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self, and knowing what you know, would you still be doing the same thing?
I think I would. Like, I think, obviously, I didn't really know this was a job when I was 16. I didn't know at all this was a job.
Okay.
And I think now that I look back, I think the thing that has always been important for me and stuff that I'm interested in is storytelling. So whatever I'm doing, and that thread of storytelling and like people is very important to me. So I think I would still be doing what I'm doing, or like in that way, in some way. But I think I would just say, like, I often get frustrated that maybe I didn't get here sooner, or I didn't know that this was a job, or I want to achieve more quickly, but I think I was never going to be like 30 under 30, or do you know what I mean? But actually that's fine. Like the way that I got here and that journey, and it being slower and different or more varied, or is actually very important. And the things that I probably bring to my job now are probably better because I was waitressing until 21, because I was doing whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I think whatever journey you take to that point is fine. You just have to keep moving. You have to keep making. You have to keep like just centering yourself. And like, as long as you're happy, as long as you're like making stuff you want to make, don't stress about it too much. You don't need to get anywhere, because that stuff will come. So yeah, I think I'd just say to like 16-year-old me, like, it's fine, have a nice time.
It's not about the destination.
Exactly.
It's about the journey.
And it's so easy to forget that.
I would give myself the Euro Millions numbers for said date if it was a Friday or Tuesday. Just FYI. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, why didn't I think of that?
I'm messing around. No, Rosanna, this has been amazing.
Thank you.
I've spoken to one of my besties, maybe the bestie of all time, because she is first on, a senior creative. This has been What My Best Friend Does. Over and out.
Thank you so much.
There.
That's
That's
it.
We're done. That's
Done.
Thanks everybody for listening to this episode of What My Best Friend Does. Please make sure to like, share, follow, and let me know what jobs you want to hear about, and I can make sure to include them on future episodes. Thank you.